Thank you, colleagues. Our next item of business is a statement by Eileen Campbell on supporting our community's COVID-19. The Cabinet Secretary and our colleagues will take questions at the end of the statement, so there should be no interventions, but I would encourage members who wish to ask a question to press their request to speak buttons as soon as possible. And I call on the Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Yesterday, the First Minister told the Parliament that we are facing an unprecedented situation that requires an unprecedented response at scale and pace to help people most at risk in our community. And I want to be clear to the Chamber, to the citizens of Scotland, that our actions will be guided by doing all that we can to protect the health, the welfare and well-being of the people of Scotland. We are in the midst of a worldwide public health emergency that is now being strongly felt here in Scotland. None of us have gone through anything like this before, and so we need to respond in new ways. That means being flexible, adaptable and ready to respond to challenges as they arise. We want to show our support to all sectors and people in Scotland. This will mean through funding, through communication and through our actions. Scotland's response to this pandemic will require everyone, councils, the third sector, businesses and communities in their widest sense to work together and to step up to this challenge. The First Minister, Cabinet Secretary for Health and Sport and the Chief Medical Officer have already clearly set out the groups whose health is most vulnerable from COVID-19 and who we are looking to shield most urgently. We'll be working with third sector partners who have contact with and already support those who are clinically vulnerable to ensure people receive the right advice on what precautions to take. Those supporting them will also have the best information available on how to keep people safe. Our focus, of course, will be on the people and communities most at risk financially and socially, but wider society will also need our help. And we must recognise that for many people, they will not be used to asking or accessing such support. This pandemic will disrupt lives like never before and cause financial hardship and negatively impact on our well-being. Actions may range from making sure people can access funds or food in times of financial crisis, to making sure homeless people are looked after, or making sure people are not lonely or feeling cut off with nowhere to turn if they are social isolating or social distancing. Presiding Officer, we will do our utmost to respond, but just as the First Minister said yesterday, we need to be open and transparent and acknowledge that sometimes we won't always get things right. Be assured, however, that protecting and supporting our people during these unparalleled times is the absolute focus of this government. We know that as a government we must respond differently in these exceptional times, and we know we cannot do this on our own. Therefore, we will work with partners and organisations in all sectors to ensure that those that are able to step up and support people and communities are enabled to do so by this government. The nature and scale of this pandemic means a dynamic and adaptable response is required. Therefore, our funding package will be focused on delivery, not bureaucracy, support, not red tape. We want all sectors, whether public, private or third sector, to think about what they can do. Our collective response will be directed by the fact that local authorities, local businesses, community groups and the third sector know and understand the support needs of their communities the best. Today, on behalf of the Scottish Government, I will announce significant resources. But let me be clear, unless we work with local partners, the impact of our investment will not be felt by those that need it most. So my message today is, if we can help you to help the people of Scotland, then we will. Tell us your solutions or ideas to help those most in need, and then let us work together to provide the support required to do that at pace. Presiding Officer, I can announce today that the Scottish Government will be making £350 million available to support people in need. The £50 million in Barnett consequentials from the UK Government's Hardship Fund is being passed directly to local authorities to support their own local resilience and hardship plans. I know that the Hardship Fund for councils in England will be going to shore up their depleted welfare funds and provide more council tax relief. This is not needed for this in Scotland, as one, we have maintained our support for the council tax reduction scheme over the last few years, and two, we will provide additional funds to support the scheme if necessary, thereby freeing councils to use this money to directly address their local needs in the best ways they see fit. We will also provide an additional £45 million for the Scottish Welfare Fund, administered by our partners in local government, which makes community care and crisis grants available to those in times of crisis and emergency. This more than doubles the current £35.5 million fund and will be accompanied by an increase in flexibilities and new guidance to make sure this fund is able to fully support people in times of financial crisis. We also have a robust council tax reduction scheme in place that is already supporting over 450,000 people and is ready to support more. £50 million of this £350 million package will go towards supporting increased demand for social security benefits and increased costs of the council tax reduction that we expect to see. We will establish a £70 million food fund to support households who may be worried about accessing food, whether due to an income drop or self-isolation, including for older people. Local authorities will be able to use funds to support those who receive free school meals and to work with all organisations in all sectors, including community groups and local businesses, to coordinate the response. Funds will also be available to support strategic national activity. £50 million will be provided for a wellbeing fund to provide support to our third sector partners in the main, but others also, who will require additional capacity to deal with, for example, the societal challenges caused by self-isolation or distancing and compounding the vulnerability of those already living in difficult circumstances. For example, those experiencing fuel poverty or those at risk or experiencing homelessness. A £40 million Supporting Communities Fund will be established to underpin the inspiring work that is already underway in our neighbourhoods and communities that will prove essential to our nation's resilience. A £20 million Third Sector Resilience Fund will be established to help our valued third sector cope with cash flow and business health. And finally, we will keep £25 million in reserve to allow us to flexibly respond and react with agility to the challenging times ahead that we cannot at this point plan for. And it's with this flexibility and responsiveness that we will respond to those who are seeking to help others, just as organisations large and small are wanting to do the same. In many cases, they are already planning this response so that they can support those they work with every day and their local communities. Some have already approached us with their plans and sought our assistance. And I'll provide 3 examples of where we have agreed funding today to let that support start immediately. Last week, Age Scotland asked us if we could help them with a significant expansion of their helpline to increase capacity from about 100 calls a day to around 1,500. Today, the First Minister announced that we are providing £80,000 to allow Age Scotland to provide this essential support to older people. I'm also pleased to confirm today that we will be working in partnership with Social Bite to enable free food and essential supplies to be delivered to organisations working with those in need across Edinburgh, Glasgow and Aberdeen. We've made £500,000 available for this initiative, which will be providing up to 3,000 meals daily, and this will be up and running by Friday. We also want to ensure we are helping local grassroots organisations. The Health Agency, a small grassroots organisation in Wester Hailes, one of the most deprived areas of Edinburgh, asked us today for assistance to allow them to establish a volunteer buddy system to provide a check-in phone call to people in their community, to ensure crucial social connections are maintained, and to provide food packages for the next 3 months to around 400 families in a community where around 85% of children are eligible for free school meals. We have said yes to the £65,000 they need to work with partners that they have lined up to take forward this response. So these are just 3 examples of organisations, large and small, stepping up when society needs them, and we'll support them to do so. We're also taking action to support people renting their homes. This is a time for all landlords, whether in social or private sector, to be flexible and adaptable to their tenants at a time of both national crisis and possibly personal crisis. Tenants, if you're experiencing issues paying your rent, please go straight to your landlord and explain them, because we as a government and society as a whole need landlords to help their tenants immediately as part of an overall society response. We cannot have people being made or at risk of being made homeless at this difficult time. Today, we have written to social landlords, urging them to be flexible and to provide support and advice to tenants experiencing financial hardship. We expect them to meet this challenge and support their tenants at this difficult time when benefits may take time to be applied for or paid. We know they have their tenants' interests at heart, and both national and local government will work with them to help with their contingency and resilience planning. In the private sector, landlords will need to be equally supportive during this public health crisis. We need to get the balance right between protecting tenants and ensuring landlords can continue to provide housing. To support this, we will address through legislation a temporary change in the current Private Housing Tenancies Act. Currently, landlords can move to eviction if a tenant is in arrears for at least 3 months in a row and if at least 1 month if rent is unpaid. At present, first-tier housing tribunals will not uphold this if the reason for non-payment of rent is a delay or failure in the payment to tenants of welfare benefits such as housing benefit or universal credit. This is a crucial part of our current legislative protection, but this temporary change we will make goes further and will increase that rent arrears period from the current 3 months to 6 months. Let me be clear, we do not want private sector landlords to be disadvantaged by a lack of rent. However, the reality of what we face means that if landlords don't support their tenants, then it's not just the tenants who will be negatively impacted, it will be all of society who will collectively pay the price. We know that many landlords have mortgages, and we know that the banks have agreed a 3-month mortgage holiday, and we commend that, and we urge private landlords who need this facility to apply for it. But we do need more. We need this to be increased to 6 months and to provide for all mortgages, including buy-to-rent. So we will write to the UK Finance and UK Government, urging them to move to providing 6-month mortgage holidays for all mortgages. Such a move would help tenants and landlords across the UK needing this vital support. To paraphrase Fiona Hislop from yesterday, just as the people helped our financial institutions at a time of crisis, now is their time to do the same. Presiding Officer, this is our response to COVID-19 in terms of supporting communities. Using the powers we have, we will build on the existing support systems already in place. We will step up our support, but we are very aware that the safety net of statutory sick pay and 85% of welfare benefit spending lies with the UK Government, including all policy and administration over income replacement benefits. Therefore, I want to urge people to ensure you are getting statutory sick pay if you are eligible. If not, and you have a fluctuating or reduced income or hours, or unfortunately have been made unemployed, I strongly urge you to access universal credit, which is a benefit that covers a variety of elements, including an income replacement element, rent element, and child tax credits. I know many people may not have accessed the welfare benefit system outside of child benefit or a pension before, but that is what the social security system is for. This is the social contract we pay into. We pay for this safety net so it is available in our time of need. Presiding Officer, this is most definitely our hour of need. And given this is a time of great need, and whilst we welcome the actions of the UK Government today, there are actions which can only be taken by the UK Government, and this is where policy and administration of sick pay and welfare benefits lie, because the numbers relying on them will increase. Now, I understand the UK Government are looking at how to further support individuals, and in that consideration now would be a good time for them to reconsider their approach to welfare and to look to increase child benefit, increase the levels of sick pay and increase universal credit. UC must be made more flexible. Hardship grants, not loans, need to be made available. The UK Government must also lift the benefit cap, increase housing allowance rates and, most importantly, reverse the cap on children. Now, I appreciate these are areas which the UK Government have been opposed to in principle before, but these are not normal times, and we would urge them to reassess these policies given the unprecedented challenges that we face. And we say that not to score political points, but because of the impending and massive need to support those already in hardship and those that will be plunged into hardship because of the impact of this pandemic. And if the UK Government take those actions, then we will welcome them unreservedly. Presiding Officer, in amongst the many negatives that we are seeking to mitigate today, what gladdens my heart are the countless acts of kindness and empathy that I've seen on display. There is no getting away from the fact that this is an uncertain time for everyone, including for government. Life as we know it is postponed. We need to get used to a new normal. And while there is a medical need for social distancing, we cannot and we must not forget that it is connectedness and kindness that help sustain our well-being. Our communities are strong and our communities are resilient. And it is that strength, along with a deep desire to help, that is motivating so many groups, charities, organisations, businesses and, importantly, individuals to do what they can to look out for one another, particularly those most at risk. That community response has been fantastic, it is to be commended and is to be emulated. We know that people will want to help others, and we know we need to keep people safe. Our first step has been to establish the funding packages that I've just outlined to the Chamber. Our next step will be to move to directly work with partners and the community groups to ask how they can help harness this community spirit, to back up the measures to support people that I've outlined, and to also fill the gaps in lives that people may now face. And we will be working fast to provide advice and information on how the public can help fulfil that urge and determination to help, because I've seen it's there in abundance and we need to harness it for the public good. We need to provide a safety net for those people experiencing hardship, and we also need to provide a community safety net for people without close family or friends nearby to help them through these challenging times. So if any groups or organisations can safely support others in their community, whether it's with befriending phone line services, helping people with the messages, walking dogs, to help people cope with the social isolation and loneliness that they could now face, we encourage them to do so. We also are aware of the pressures that staying at home and the potential impact for services offering support for victims of gender-based violence, and we're offering weekly teleconferences with stakeholders to review impact and demand on services. Information on the support services available will be widely disseminated. Finally, Presiding Officer, Scotland's response to tackling COVID-19 will primarily and rightly be a medical and scientific one, but the human qualities of kindness and empathy are critical to help our country emerge through this tough challenge. Thank you, and I look forward to other members' questions.
Thank you very much, and I believe that as well as the Cabinet Secretary for supporting our communities, the Cabinet Secretary for Social Security and Older People will also be available to answer questions. Graham Simpson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And can I start by thanking the Cabinet Secretary for advance sight of her statement? That was very useful. And can I make a small suggestion? Because we have this crisis, and it is a crisis, and it's fast moving, I think it would be useful if both Cabinet Secretaries were to have weekly, or maybe more than weekly, conversations with spokespeople from other parties, so that when we get to statements like this, we're all on the same page and we're all buying into what the government is doing, because that's exactly what we want to do. As Jackson Carlaw has already said, we're all in this together and we all need to pull together and work together. So that's just a genuine offer, and I hope it's taken up. Well, I welcome what's in the statement, the announcement of extra money, of various new funds, and we do need to act quickly. I want to ask questions around two areas, homelessness and rents. There was a couple of mentions of the homeless, but no great detail. Now, at a time when winter shelters such as the Glasgow City Mission are closing, I would like to see, and I wonder if the Cabinet Secretary can address this, some mention of alternative accommodation for homeless people. Clearly, given the nature of the situation we're in, we don't want homeless people to necessarily be in shelters, but there should be somewhere else for them to go. So can the Cabinet Secretary address that point? And of course, people who fail to pay their rent because they're suddenly put into financial hardship because of this virus could end up homeless themselves. So I can see and I welcome the news that the Cabinet Secretary wants to change legislation. Could you say how quickly that is going to be done? Because I know we're up against it in terms of the parliamentary timescale. And could she say if she's spoken to landlord organisations about this? Because clearly there could be a risk that landlords could get out of the private rented sector, and we wouldn't want to see that. Thank you.
Thank you. Aileen Campbell.
Thank you very much, and again, I really appreciate the constructive points that Graham Simpson has raised. In direct answer to the issue and the plea to continue to work and inform opposition members, absolutely, Shirley-Anne and myself will work as best we can and establish a rhythm of ways in which we can keep everyone updated and informed, most importantly possibly the opposition spokespeople on this matter. I hope you understand that some of this has been pretty fast-paced and some of that usual information might not have been as easy to flow to opposition spokespeople, but from now on we'll keep you updated. In terms of homelessness, we covered a range of things in my statement, but in terms of homelessness, yes, we absolutely want to make sure that we're supporting people who are homeless, rough sleeping. We've already announced, for instance, the £500,000 to Social Bite in terms of providing food. In terms of the closure of the winter night shelter in Glasgow, we're absolutely making sure that there's resources there to help with that. We're also exploring and developing plans to increase capacity in the coming days, including the use of hotel bed spaces and vacant student accommodation. So we're trying to explore everything to try and find ways in which we can support people who need to self-isolate and to do so safely. In terms of the rented question that Mr Simpson raises, the legislation will need to go pretty quick. It will be a fast-paced bit of legislation that we'll need to implement as quickly as Parliament can enable us to. Of course, it does help if the opposition are indicating that they're fairly supportive in this territory, so that will enable us to make sure that we have the appropriate scrutiny, but also ensure that we get legislation quickly to ensure that we meet the needs of the people. And Kevin Stewart has engaged and written with a range of different stakeholders around some of the provisions that we're needing to make around housing, homelessness and the rented sector more generally.
Thank you very much. Pauline McNeill.
I want to thank the Cabinet Secretary and the Ministers for all they are doing in this crisis. But I want to say that I think that the Government should go much further. And I want to set out where I think we could go with this. The first thing is I think that tenants, and the Cabinet Secretary knows this, are going to be extremely vulnerable, and she set out their reasons why she agrees with that. But I do want to ask if the Government could look at an approach that more broadly mirrors what we're doing for mortgage players. And this is where I'm going with this. So there should be no evictions across the board, regardless of what housing tenure. This is the approach I think we need to try to take. And as the Cabinet Secretary has said, there be mortgage holidays for those who buy to let, or that needs to be passed on to tenants. And she's right in the approach that she's taken with landlords. It must be harder to evict. Now, we do want to talk in detail about your proposal. We do not think it goes far enough. We think that the whole amount needs to be uplifted. So we can see what you're trying to do here by extending the 3 to 6 months. But if you add 1 month in arrears, then you would still be caught out by this. We want to extend that period. We want to discuss that with you. We think that the pre-action protocols that are in place for mortgage holders could be looked at for renters here to try and mirror, because I suppose the objective would be to stop people going into arrears and building up huge debt. And I know that's a huge question. We think there should be rent breaks are essential. It should be common practice. I would like to discuss with the Government how rent breaks could become a central feature for renters during this period. And I'll finish on this point in relation to the social sector, where you might think it's possibly easier to provide rent holidays. What local authorities are appealing for is the Government to say whether or not they will underwrite that in some way. The concern is that if you give a rent holiday in the social sector and for local authorities, and that would have an impact in itself. Thank you.
Aileen Campbell.
Again, thank Pauline McNeill for her questions and the points that she makes. I think generally, we're probably all in a kind of space of agreement that we need to, and we recognise that people shouldn't be evicted because of this pandemic, and that's something that we are seeking to try and do through the legislation and through the details that I set out in my statement. So that's absolutely, I think, in a place of agreement. We don't want people to be evicted. There should be no evictions during this period when we're trying to cope and deal with this pandemic and the impact that that has on people and the risk of that and the impact that has on people's mental health and well-being as well. So we'll continue to engage. If you have ideas and thoughts that you want to share, we'll continue to take that discussion away, and we'll continue to engage with you on that. But we'll also need to make sure that we align some of these provisions along with the wider benefit system as well, to make sure people are absolutely getting all they need and all they are entitled to support them during this time where people may be plunged into financial hardship. That can route and passport other benefits and responses to them to help them keep their financial resilience intact. And in terms of social landlords, we'll continue to engage with them and local authorities. We've announced a package of support measures there that should be considered to help ensure that people who are living in social rented accommodation do also not have that fear of eviction over their head or financial vulnerability placed on them if they have challenges in meeting their rent. So there's a range of measures in place, a significant and sizable chunk of money. We've also got that bit in reserve, so if some of these things start requiring us to put a bit of extra resource into other areas as the pandemic continues, then we're able to do so, and that's why we need to be adaptable and agile in this. But I think on the whole, I think we agree that no eviction should be something we try to make happen. One way we believe we can make that happen is through the legislation that we propose today.
Thank you. Andy Whiteman to be followed by Willie Rennie.
Thank you. Two questions, Cabinet Secretary. You've mentioned some changes to the private rented sector. I have constituents this week who are receiving notices to quit, either under Parts 1 and 2 of Schedule 2 of the Housing Scotland Act 1988 or Parts 1 to 4 of the Schedule 3 of the Private Housing Tenancy Scotland Act 2016. Does the Cabinet Secretary agree with me that we should have emergency legislation to suspend these two parts of the private rented legislation in order to put in effect what she has just said, which is that she does not want any evictions to take place? And secondly, the Health Secretary, the Economy Secretary and herself just a moment ago said we're in an emergency. I've spoken to colleagues in local government. As Cabinet Secretary is aware, local government is a Category 1 responder under the Civil Contingencies Act 2004. Now, I'm aware that local government have been asking Scottish Government for very specific powers from Scottish ministers this week. When will Scottish ministers, or when do they plan, to invoke the emergency powers under the 2004 Act to enable councils to respond fast and flexibly to a wide range of responsibilities?
Aileen Campbell.
So we have outlined today a package of measures that we believe will bring about the thing that we all are united behind, is to ensure that there is no evictions. Again, if the member wants to feed in his thoughts, we can look at it, but this is what we believe is a practical, pretty swift package of measures that will enable us to ensure that there are no evictions. That is our intent. That's what we aim to see happen. In terms of local government around their involvement in this resilience, both COSLA and Solace are involved in the wider government resilience discussions and meetings that we have. We're in close contact with local government at both the Solace level and at COSLA level to make sure that they understand what we're doing as a national government and how we can help and then support them, and likewise what they're doing through their local resilience plans to respond to community need. We can discuss the dynamics of what that might mean and what that might look like. We're open to anything. You know, we're not going to be precious about any of this. We need to respond swiftly to the need of our country, and that requires us to be bold, imaginative, innovative, be a bit uncomfortable at times about what that might mean. So if local government want to continue to ask for these things, they feel they're not getting the response they require, then by all means we'll continue that dialogue. But be assured, we are already in that dialogue with COSLA and Solace at the moment, regularly, and at that top resilience level.
Thank you very much. Willie Rennie.
I think these are a sensible set of measures. We need to return to this issue. However, when the Chancellor delivers on his promise statement on renters, that might change the environment significantly. So I think we perhaps should come back to this and revise what we're doing. But I want to ask about the bins. How do we ensure that there's going to be a continuity of waste collection over the current or the future period? And are private skip companies being contacted to assist in these circumstances?
Aileen Campbell.
Again, as I indicated to Andy Whiteman, we're in regular contact with COSLA and with Solace, and we understand that those local resilience plans will be looking at all of these things about how you keep society functioning and going on as we cope with this pandemic, which is unprecedented in its nature. So let's not forget that that is the case, that we're trying to respond to something that none of us have ever had to respond to. But these are the kind of basic questions that people will likely start to ask. And it's unfortunate for many people who are collecting the refuse that they can't work from home. That is something that they need to be doing in person and in our communities. So these local resilience plans will be accommodating all of that, and will continue to make sure, though, that that flow of information, if people have particular concerns in their local areas, that we can share that information where required and make sure we provide that reassurance to ensure that we keep society at the moment ticking on in the way that we need it, to ensure that people can believe and feel comforted that things are moving in the right way and that their homes and their communities are kept clean.
Thank you very much. Gillian Martin, to be followed by Maurice Corrie. Gillian Martin.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I want to thank the Cabinet Secretary for a statement. I've advised all my staff to familiarise themselves with the content in it and stand ready to signpost our constituents to the right help. It would be very helpful if we can have from the various departments an actual email out to all MSPs which has links to all the funds that have been mentioned today and all the mechanisms, so that we can all be disseminating that as needed. But my question is about fuel poverty. I'd like to ask what the government is doing to ensure people, and many people that we've all experienced emails from people who've lost their income overnight as a result of maybe being a 0 hours contract or whatever, make sure that those people aren't fuel poor. Can the Cabinet Secretary outline what's been done to help people pay their gas bills, their electricity bills and keep warm?
Gillian Campbell.
So, in part, I think I responded to some of this in the discussions yesterday around some of the actions that we're having to take forward, particularly with the energy companies, because energy companies will have a huge role to play with this issue around fuel poverty. We are engaging with Energy UK around the vulnerable energy consumers, and are also in contact with them earlier today to get an update on their work. We also have asked our stakeholders, Home Energy Scotland, Citizen Advice Scotland and others to advise government officials if they become aware of any issues of people who may experience fuel poverty as it relates to the pandemic. We continue to be involved with energy officials and energy suppliers and make sure that we can respond proactively. There are other ways, though, that are outlined in my statement today that may be of assistance. The Scottish Welfare Fund, some of these emergency measures that people can access, and we hope with the flexibility that we want to attach to that, so that people can get that money and response easily and quickly should they need it. So I think the point that you made earlier, though, is also very valid. I'm kind of conscious as someone who's on Twitter and on social media as well, that I see lots of helplines coming out from lots of third sector organisations, from government ourselves, all been providing, I think, creating quite a lot of clutter for people who might want to try and navigate that system earlier. So we'll take that point on board and see if there's some way that we can corral that into a much better place, so that people can easily access the information, the direction and guidance about where they need to go to get that swift, quick help.
Thank you. Maurice Corrie, to be followed by Kenneth Gibson. Maurice Corrie.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I too thank the Cabinet Secretary for early sight of her statement. Our vulnerable armed forces veterans who rely very heavily on groups which meet at their local veteran centres as part of their recovery, rehabilitation and well-being is in some cases preventing even suicide, and could be at risk due to these centres being closed on government advice. Support and protection of both veterans and the wider population's mental health is of great concern at this time of increasing isolation. Now, homelessness is also an issue for our veterans, and I'm pleased to hear today the Cabinet Secretary's comments in her statement about action that she's going to take along with the Housing Minister, and I welcome that support here now. What is the Cabinet Secretary going to do to ensure that a safe alternative form of support can be offered to our veterans over the next period of time in place of the closures of these veteran centres?
So I think that, again, I really appreciate it. I know that you have a real strong interest in this, and you do the particular group that you're interested in, veterans, a real service in this chamber by continually to make sure that you're a champion for them. I think, though, your question maybe gets to the nub of I hope what was clear in the statement is that we are not directly necessarily always going to be the answer to some of those questions. It will be us supporting organisations that are well placed to provide that support that you have articulated. So if the member knows organisations, groups that are well placed to shift what they do, support people in their communities that are able to step up and require a bit of support to enable them to do so, then please make sure through your contacts that you let them know that this door is open and that we need to want to support them to do the work that they do well, which might need to be rejigged and refocused in order to help them support those who might have been used to much more social gatherings, to make sure that that might be online, phone calls, a whole host of different ways in which we can support people. But please get in touch and make sure that those organisations that you're close to get in touch with us quickly.
Kenneth Gibson, to be followed by Sarah Boyack.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Cabinet Secretary, personal protective equipment has rightly been provided for hospital and GP staff. However, as far as I'm aware, no provision has been made for high street pharmacy staff, including counter staff who serve our communities. Anyone with any symptoms can walk into a community pharmacy and ask questions such as, I have a sore throat and fever, can you take a look? Therefore, what protection will Scottish ministers put in place to help pharmacy staff, given that pharmacies will be required to remain open during this crisis?
I think that's a very real and pertinent issue, and I will make sure that we take that and we raise it with Jean Freeman, make sure that those concerns from community pharmacists are addressed. I think she answered some questions yesterday in relation to protective equipment for GP surgeries. So we need to make sure that when the health service in its broadest sense has been asked to respond to this, that they feel that they're being kept safe and protected. So we'll take that point and make sure that Jean Freeman and her health colleagues undertake to get a response to Mr Gibson.
Sarah Boyack, to be followed by Alexander Stewart.
Can I start by thanking the comment that was made by Gillian Martin about access to advice? I think that would be really useful, so I'm glad you were very positive in that, Cabinet Secretary. Although the Cabinet Secretary rightly mentioned prevention of homelessness, I would be very interested in hearing more about what will be done to eliminate homelessness, given the particular vulnerability of people who are currently homeless to COVID-19 and to avoid its spread. I have had constituents writing in to say they would be interested to hear whether vacant homes or empty tourist accommodation could be used to house homeless people and to try and deliver the long-term change we need to eliminate homelessness, and to ask what support will be available to those in the third sector who are working hard to support their volunteers and make sure they are protected as they act to support homeless people at the moment.
Campbell.
Again, thank Sarah Boyack for her questions. In terms of the first point she made, we are absolutely already exploring whether we can use hotel bed spaces, vacant student accommodation. We are looking at other areas where there might be currently vacancies and places for people who are homeless can go to so they can safely self-isolate if they require to. There's already been resource provided around hand gels and sanitisers to keep people who are on the front line safe. If you hear or detect where that's not the case, then please let us know and we'll try and rectify that as soon as we can. But I would also point to more generally that third sector resilience fund as well. We know that along with businesses, that lots of third sector organisations will also be feeling a bit vulnerable at this point in time around their business model and how they can continue going forward. So we have also outlined that package there of support that third sector organisations can tap into, along with support as well for them to refocus what they might have to do to respond to the pandemic. Again, a package of measures there for third sector, which we hope will indicate the value that we attach to what they do in our communities and support them practically with resource.
Alexander Stewart, to be followed by Emma Harper.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Cabinet Secretary, clearly one of the hardest hit sectors during this crisis will be the third sector. And I very much welcome the resilience funds that have been set aside. But also, can I ask the Scottish Government what action it will provide along with that financial support to ensure that no voluntary organisations are forced into insolvency due to the difficulties they will face with their cash flow?
Thank you again, and I think that's also very prevalent and uppermost in our minds about how we can continue to support our third sector and social enterprises during this uncertain time. That's why we've got the £20 million package there for us to be able to support some of those groups financially. They need to let us know if they require that support, and again we've got that additional bit of reserves in place if things emerge and we can adapt and change our approach. So hopefully that provides the reassurance the member is looking for.
Emma Harper, to be followed by Monica Lennon.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for her statement this afternoon in Chamber. Clearly ensuring that our population can continue to access essential foods and goods in the supermarkets is absolutely necessary. How will the Government provide food resilience, particularly in rural areas, for those requiring emergency food who cannot get out of the house due to self-isolation or illness?
And that's an incredibly important issue. At the basic level, we want to keep people warm, safe and fed. and food resilience is going to be critical in the months ahead. That's why we have put in place the £70 million food fund to support families who would otherwise be unable to access food. That will also help cover some of the necessary support to cover free school meals and those older people who may also be vulnerable as well to food insecurity. So some of that will also support community endeavour. I know that there will be lots of community organisations in the region that Emma Harper covers who will already be thinking about how they can help their communities cope with food insecurity, about how they can get food parcels to different people, how the food banks might want to respond to that need. And that's exactly what we want to hear, so that that food fund can get out to the communities that we know need that help. And we also understand that there will be particular challenges in our more rural areas about the logistics of that. So that, again, is what we want to achieve through that £70 million food fund, to respond to that need, to respond to that community endeavour, but also where we need to work with our local authorities around the support that needs of those families that may be vulnerable and older people who require extra support at this time. So again, if Emma Harper knows of some organisations that she believes can be part of that response, then she should let us know.
Monica Lennon, to be followed by Willie Coffey.
Thank you. The Cabinet Secretary rightly talked about the importance of volunteers at this crucial time. Does she share my disappointment that life-saving volunteers from first responders across Scotland have been stood down last night by the Scottish Ambulance Service because of the concerns raised yesterday about the lack of personal protective equipment? That is a real loss as we try and deal with this pandemic. And can I give her two quick local examples which relate to the food issues that have been raised? Loaves and Fishes in East Kilbride have had to close their doors because of a lack of supplies. That's largely because they use cash donations to go to local supermarkets and have found the shelves to be empty. They're also worried about safety for their volunteers. And Hamilton Church's Drop-In, who provide hot meals in the evenings to vulnerable people, they have also closed their service. Now, we do have volunteers who want to be present in the evenings to take part, but they're worried about the best way to go about that. What advice and support can government provide to these local groups and many, many others who are ready, who want to respond, but are finding that there are barriers already in the way? Please help, Cabinet Secretary.
Yeah, again, I thank Monica Lennon for raising these issues and those particular local issues that are maybe highlight some of the challenges that we'll have to try and find ways to work around. Now, in our £70 million food fund, I mean, we've not ruled out ourselves purchasing food. We did some of that during the preparations for Brexit, where we worked with FareShare to make sure that we had food in place in order to respond to any food insecurity issues that may have arisen through Brexit. So some of those plans, thankfully, we didn't have to use entirely, but we've managed to now have a network in place that we can respond to some of the issues that Monica Lennon raises. I would say that we would need to also recognise the work that Fergus Ewan is doing. He has engaged with a number of the players around the food system to ensure that we can continue to see supply. There's probably a role for supermarkets also. We already see supermarkets already responding to the panic buying that's happening across the country. But in terms of the two organisations that Monica Lennon mentions, we are happy to work with them to see what we can do to support. We have money there in place to enable that response to happen and to happen with the pace and speed that we know it needs to. And in terms of the first responders, again, we'll look at this because we don't want to lose volunteers at this point in time. We do not want that to be the message that goes out there. It may be that we can use those volunteers for other things, that they first respond in other ways that are not necessarily the ways in which they do in a medical sense. But we absolutely will continue to work with our colleagues in health to ensure that that volunteer, that body, that army of volunteers who will be so necessary and so critical to help our country cope with this, that they are valued and supported, and that we can ensure that their determination to support is enabled in all its sense.
Willie Coffey, to be followed by Jackie Bailey.
Thank you. Similar to the previous question, can I ask the Cabinet Secretary how we and the wider public can support that emerging and growing volunteer network to help those in isolation, and how healthy local people can get involved?
Yeah, absolutely. There is probably a number of ways. I think even just in my own constituency, the fact of just sharing what local communities are doing is possibly one way, but that's a very local, practical way. But I think the other thing that we need to do as a government is to make sure that we can enable volunteers to feel that they can respond to this and to do so safely. So, for instance, when we're supporting people through our homelessness work, that has meant supplying hand gel, and so it might be that we need to think about these things in order to keep people safe, so that they keep themselves well and that we don't compound any issues further. But we are already seeing a number of volunteer networks growing to support the community needs that they are part of. So again, it would be directing those organisations to the funding that we've announced today to make sure that they can get any support that they need to do the work that they're continuing to do in their communities.
Jackie Bailey, to be followed by Richard Lyle.
One of the eligibility criteria for the Scottish Welfare Fund for a crisis grant is that you cannot make more than 3 claims in any given year. Given the extraordinary circumstances in which we find ourselves and the significant hardship likely to be caused by coronavirus, will the Cabinet Secretary for Social Security waive this requirement?
In that case, Shirley Ann Somerville.
I would be delighted to confirm that that is indeed the case, as well as the additional money that's going into the Scottish Welfare Fund. It's very, very important that we provide guidance about the new arrangements for that. And one of the most obvious ones is the example that Jackie Bailey gave about the 3 crisis grants. However, again, as Eileen Campbell has said a number of times during this, if there are other areas around the flexibility required over the Scottish Welfare Fund that members would wish to see, then please do let me know, let my officials know. We are working on that updated guidance for local authorities and would be delighted to work with members across the chamber if there's other areas within that guidance that we should take forward.
Thank you. Richard Lyle, to be followed by Brian Whittle.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I commend the Cabinet Secretary on her statement. Cabinet Secretary, the £70 million food fund is especially welcome. But I am concerned that low-income families with school children who will now be at school, not be at school after Friday may not be able to give them a hot meal each day. Most councils previously ran programmes during the summer holidays for children to get a decent meal, hot meal. Can we ensure that possibly pre-packed meals that can be heated can be collected at local council offices or food banks to help feed our children during this crisis?
Eileen Campbell.
And thank you to Richard Lyle. It is a very real and pressing concern that we have around what happens if you shut a school. For those children that are entitled to free school meals, what do they do next? And local authorities are working hard to make sure that that is a need that is met. And already we know and understand that there are local authorities who are already thinking innovatively about how they will respond to that need. That will mean that we don't prescribe what that response would look like. Local circumstances will change from authority to authority. There will also be, alongside that, lots of community action that will be well placed to support pupils and families across the country. And again, that's why that need for food is why we've announced the £70 million to help support community endeavour and ensure that we support families who will be requiring that extra support at this pressing time. And again, we'll continue to keep members updated, and again ask members to keep us informed about where they see a need and where they see communities that require a bit of support.
Brian Whittle, to be followed by Joanne Lamond.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. We'll all know local third sector services like the Recovery Cafe close to my office, who are a lifeline to those who are suffering from addiction. Tackling isolation and loneliness is a key factor in the work of these organisations, which of course flies in the face of the advice on how we deal with coronavirus. So what advice and support can the Cabinet Secretary offer organisations such as these so they can continue their vital work with some of the most vulnerable in our communities?
Shirley Ann Somerville.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Brian Whittle does raise an extremely important point. I'm aware that there are a number of organisations, whether it's supporting people with addictions or supporting people through mental health, that usually meets on a social basis. It goes back to the point that Maurice Corrie made earlier on about veterans as well. We are absolutely ready to stand by to support organisations who are going to have to look at how they provide that service in a different way. I know, for example, that there are some who are looking to meet digitally, who might not have the technology to allow them to do that. That may require funding. That's why the funding's here that we've announced today, both for small community organisations, but also for the national organisations as well. There are the different funding streams too. So I think, again, I would repeat what Aileen Campbell said earlier on. If all members could go back to the areas that they represent and speak to those types of organisations and ask them what they need, and if they do have the ability to adapt, if they do have the ability to staff up, which is challenging because they might be going through a diminution in their staffing numbers as well, but if they do have that ability, but they're needing additional support to allow them to do that, then these funds stand ready to be able to assist them to do exactly that, because we are really, really aware that the social isolation and loneliness aspect of this, and that's a really important area that we need to tackle at the same time.
Joanne Lamont, to be followed by Angela Constance.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer, and can I thank the Cabinet Secretary for her statement. Can I say that I was concerned that when the Finance Secretary was asked about a helpline for people who have lost their jobs, maybe facing eviction, have never been in a benefit system, it's asked about a helpline that would mirror that for business. The Finance Secretary said that that was a matter for communities. I wonder if the Cabinet Secretary would acknowledge that if we do not get this right, this will not just have a social impact, but will have a massive economic impact. And people facing these challenges deserve the same rigour and certainty as business is being given. And would she agree this is not an add-on, it's essential that your work is at the heart of what the government does? And on a very practical issue, can I ask the Cabinet Secretary if she's had any discussions with the credit union movement about the role that they might be able to play in ensuring that people can access emergency funding that they may need?
Aileen Campbell.
Yeah, absolutely. I recognise all the points that Joanne Lamont's made. I think you're right. We have to make sure that the information that's going is right and it's appropriately signposted. I think that was points that were made by Gillian Martin, Sarah Boyack. So we need to ensure that we're not seeing some of the issues that we're describing today in isolation from some of the statement that had happened previously. And in reality, we are working across government to make sure that that cooperation, collaboration is happening together. So we will make sure that there is the appropriate signposting. We will make sure that we can get the right advice to people who need support and advice around employment rights. I would also point to the fact that we've also got packages of and support lines out there already, Money Talk Team, to ensure that people's income is maximised and that they can get directed to the appropriate place to get additional financial support. We'll continue to work, though, to make sure that that's streamlined, because unfortunately it might be that people feel that there's too many different helplines and they need to make sure that they're going to the right one. And in terms of credit unions, while I haven't immediately hadn't directly had conversations with credit unions, my officials will be engaging with credit unions, because we will see them that if they require to access some of that funding for the third sector resilience or for some of the other funding measures that we announced today, that they should be able to access that and ensure that their cash flow is there to respond to the community needs that they serve.
Angela Constance, before by Ross Greer.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. As well as encouraging the Cabinet Secretary for Communities to engage with the credit union movement, I wonder if she can respond to the larger social enterprise in my constituency, with 84% of their income coming from catering, training and employability contracts. They face financial wipeout. But nonetheless, they want to step in, help reach and feed those at risk of hunger, and also advise on how to cook, a crucial skill that I think is going to become all the more important. So at a very practical level, how can that I think is going to become all the more important. So at a very practical level, how can small local organisations like the larder quick of approach?
Aileen Campbell.
Yeah, and in amongst the Third Sector Resilience Fund, there is absolutely provision in that to support social enterprise. We're engaging with social enterprise partners on that as well. So if there are business needs that require assistance, then that organisation should absolutely apply for that. But because that blurs into, I think the organisation that Angela Constance talks about blurs into that need to tackle food insecurity, then that is exactly the type of organisation that should be looking to maybe refocus what they do, but to respond to community need and access some of the funding that we've announced today so that they can step up and feed their community and provide some of that additional guidance that that organisation that I think we're quite familiar with do so well.
Ross Greer, to be followed by Sandra White.
Thank you. We've just sent outline proposals for a home delivery service for young people who normally receive free school meals to the Deputy First Minister, so we warmly welcome the £70 million food fund. But I've heard that suggestions of cash compensation being dispensed to these families as an alternative to the meals. Can the Cabinet Secretary confirm that the Government's intention is to ensure that all eligible children and young people receive a meal delivered to their home? And following Emma Harper's point about rural communities, as well as making best use of council staff such as bus drivers for otherwise suspended services, could she confirm that the Government will engage with the Royal Mail regarding their offer of becoming an additional emergency service? Between them, there's the infrastructure to reach every household in the country for the purposes of a service such as this.
What I would say is that I don't think we're going to have a blanket one-size-fits-all approach to tackling the issue around free school meals. For some families, maybe a cash in their pockets would be appropriate. Indeed, our whole work as a government to tackle poverty is to make sure that we get money into people's pockets. So that might be entirely appropriate. But it might also be appropriate that the families get meals and they get them delivered. And if the Royal Mail are placed well to help us with that, then, and they're wanting to work with us to do that, then we'll absolutely work with them. But we've also had third sector organisations. I know it's not exactly the same area of group that we're talking about, but for instance, Social Bite have said that they can get meals out to people who are vulnerable and homeless, and they can do that pretty quickly. We've also heard of a range of third sector organisations and community groups that are doing likewise. Local authorities will also be finding their own solution. We'll have that within the resilience plans. So it might not be one answer to your question, it might be a range of things, but we have to trust our local communities, our authorities, to get the right response in their local area because they know their communities best. But again, if you have indication of where you think there needs to be more support or more attention, then again, in our regular dialogue that we've committed to have, that would be the place for us, for you to raise any issues in the future.
Sandra White, to be followed by Alex Cole-Hamilton.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. The Cabinet Secretary will be aware of thousands of students who not only study in my constituency of Glasgow Kelvin, but beyond in Scotland as well, are not eligible to claim any kind of benefits and only receive student loans and grant support during term time. These students would normally find work in hospitality, tourism, etc. over the summer months to fund rent, food, etc. Now, given the current situation, would the Cabinet Secretary look to offer these students access to financial support?
Leanne Somerville.
More than happy to look to see whether there's any other flexibilities in the Scottish Welfare Fund that need to be put in, for example, and to see whether there's any issues around eligibility. I would say to Sandra White, though, that we will be limited by what we can do simply because we have 15% of the benefit powers up here, not the whole amount. I'm very aware that the DWP and the UK Government as a whole are working at speed, as we are, to look to see whether there are areas where they need to build in more flexibility. I would be happy to pass on Sandra White's view on this around students to them to see if there's anything that can be done at that level, because I am very keen to work collaboratively and supportively with the UK Government to see what we can do up here, but what if it can only be done down at UK, if we can share the ideas around that, then I'm happy to do so.
Alex Cole-Hamilton, followed by Gordon MacDonald.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. This Sunday is Mother's Day, and many of us are already planning to include our older parents by Skyping them into what we're doing as families. It's what we're having to do in this new reality with so many older people already in self-isolation. But many older people in Scotland simply don't have the technology to be able to take advantage of things like Skype or other platforms to be included in family events. Is there some aspect of the Wellbeing Fund that can be used to purchase technological infrastructure to give to older people in self-isolation?
Shirley Ann Somerville.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. It's a really interesting proposal that Alec Cole-Hamilton has suggested. I'd be happy to take that away and to see what can be done. I think the challenge would be how to actually deliver that in reality, and I think that's where some of the practicalities might come in. I think some of the areas where we are keen, obviously, to look to see what can be done is supporting wider community activities to support older people if they don't have access to friends and family that are close by. But let me take that away, let me look at it very seriously. I'm happy to do that. It may be that the practicalities get in the way, but it may be that we can come up with another solution to the challenge that the members quite rightly raised around that, and I'm particularly cognisance of Mother's Day coming up on that aspect as well.
Gordon MacDonald, to be followed by Jamie Green.
Across my constituency, there are unpaid carers who will be facing an increase in a range of pressures in the months ahead. Can the Cabinet Secretary advise what steps can be taken to support carers who might have to self-isolate?
Aileen Campbell. Sorry, Shirley-Ann Somerville, beg pardon.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The aspects around unpaid carers is an area where we are giving very serious consideration to what can be done. There is aspects around that we might look to Social Security to pick up, whether that's at a Scottish level or at a DWP level. And I would say again that obviously we are keen to work with the DWP on that. He raised another challenge which quite rightly is something which I know is concerning many carers who have been in touch with me, and that's what happens if they have to self-isolate or if they actually feel unwell themselves. Again, I would reassure Gordon MacDonald that the health officials and the health secretary is looking very seriously at what needs to be done to ensure that we continue to support people, particularly if there are challenges around that their carer may not be able to deliver the care that they normally do. So hopefully we can provide him reassurance that that is something that we're very keen to look at, because I know that that is something which is given great concern to many families across Scotland, and we do take that very seriously.
Jamie Green, to be followed by Bob Doris.
Thank you. I found this afternoon session very interesting, very positive, but I think the reality is many people in Scotland aren't necessarily following proceedings in the Chamber or have access to social media or reading government press releases. They simply react to what they see on national news and the national media. Many elderly folk living alone have no family to rely on our system. So can I ask the front bench of the government if they've considered the potential of a countrywide mass mail-out to every household with some specific advice on who to call, where they can pick the phone up and speak to somebody if they're running out of food, if they need access to medicine, if they can't top up their energy, and so on. I think many people are just simply confused at the rapidly changing advice and may not be following some of the good advice that we're getting from the government today.
Shirley-Ann Somerville.
Absolutely is a key point that we need to look at. There is no point setting these funds up if people don't know that they're available and don't know that the support is out there. Hopefully the member will be reassured that we are also looking to put into place very quickly a nationwide marketing campaign that would, for example, build on the types of encouragement that we're trying to do for volunteering, but so that people know how to do that safely. And to also maybe to reassure older people to be able to ask for assistance. It's also something which, again, we're working with the UK government on, because we're very keen to make sure that there's not mixed messages going out, or there's not confusing messages about marketing that's being done by the UK government and different marketing that's being done by the Scottish government. So we're working closely on that to share ideas, but hopefully I can provide him with the reassurance that that is developing very quickly, and we'll put into place how we can support people and how people can access that support as well.
Bob Doris, to be followed by Claudia Beamish.
Presiding Officer, following reassurances the Cabinet Secretary for Communities gave me yesterday regarding funding for food need and community resilience being imminent, partners in North Glasgow, including NG Homes and Glasgow North West Citizens Advice, are today drafting an urgent bid, an urgent proposal. I am therefore delighted to hear of the £70 million food fund, the £50 million wellbeing fund and the £40 million supporting communities fund. The bid is likely to be substantial and straddle all three funds. How will this be managed by government, and should such a bid come direct to government, yourself as Cabinet Secretary, And if that bid is submitted this week, as we hope it will be, how quickly can decisions be made and cash paid out?
Aileen Campbell.
Again, thank you to the member and for raising the good work that his organisation, his constituency does. I mean, I think the honest truth is that it just will be managed. We've said that this has to be adaptable. We have to respond innovatively and quickly to need. It might be that the blurred lines between the different funding pots is a necessity because there will be, of course, crossover across all of the pots that we've announced today. So what I would just say is that if the organisation gets their idea into the mix, then at least we can then start to consider it and then work out how we actually route that fund in later. I would also point out that Age Concern asked us last week for money, and we've agreed it, and it's out the door and announced by the First Minister today. That's the kind of speed that we're going to have to work at. And again, I would also point out to what I said at the start of my statement. Sometimes we won't always get things right, but we'll endeavour to do what we can because we want to make sure that we support the people that we are all here collectively to serve and represent. And if that is our guiding principle, then hopefully the decisions that we do take are the right ones and meet the needs of the people and communities that we're elected for.
Claudia Beamish, followed by Maureen Ward.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I ask the Cabinet Secretary for Communities if she would consider liaising with the Cabinet Secretary for Health about the possible issuing of guidance on taking fresh air and exercise outdoors for our physical and indeed mental well-being? Which groups can go out for these reasons if they keep social distance, and can guidance be issued on this?
Aileen Campbell.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, we continually work across the Cabinet. You know, some of the things that we've discussed today don't fit neatly into one ministerial portfolio. The truth is it's a collective effort across the whole of government to respond to the needs of our communities. But I think the points that Claudia Beamish made are absolutely correct. If on one hand we're talking about self-isolation, we also need to recognise the real importance of exercise and activity. As a former sports minister, I'm acutely aware of that myself. So we want to get those messages right so that people can maintain not only their health in terms of the response to COVID-19, but also that wider issue of well-being, which physical activity is a big part of.
Maureen Watt to be followed by Colin Smith.
As it's already been said, it's difficult to underestimate the impact that social isolation and loneliness can have on our health and well-being. There may even be groups for whom meeting in groups is an essential part of maintaining their well-being, be that the elderly, pregnant woman or people recovering from addiction. Can the Cabinet Secretary suggest ways and give examples of ways in which such groups could implement innovative means of maintaining contact while exercising social distance?
Aileen Campbell. Oh, sorry, Shirley Ann Somerville.
It is remarkable, some of the ideas that are already being followed through on this, whether it's the community choir that Christina McKelvey was talking to me about earlier, not that she's taking part in it, I don't believe, presiding officer, but other people will be, or whether there's the accordion player up in Shetland that Aileen Campbell was telling me about yesterday, providing online festivities for older people. So there is innovation going on, and that's happening without the support of government. And I think what we're announcing today is if there's requirements for government to be able to step in to provide technology, to be able to provide support in allowing that to happen on an even wider scale and for larger organisations, then we absolutely stand ready to do that. And I'm also obviously aware that businesses are looking to do exactly the same thing, to move what they can perhaps do onto online mechanisms as well. And I think the more we can encourage and support people to be innovative about how we deal with this, and as Aileen Campbell said during her statement, to know that the government is here ready and willing to support them as they innovate, and I think that's an important message we can take from today as we tackle the social isolation that would take place in our society unless we take this on head on and look to see how we can challenge that.
And Colin Smith.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Cabinet Secretary will know that often as a result of government policy and pressures on council budgets, many former council assets such as community centres have been transferred out of council ownership to be run by local trusts. These centres are currently seeing their income plummet as events are being cancelled on a daily basis. Their charitable status means that they
currently do not pay rates anyway, so any new rates relief scheme won't actually help them. So can the Cabinet Secretary say specifically what will be done to ensure those community centres are given support to maintain their cash flow? Because the centres who have contacted me have made it absolutely clear that without such help, they're going to close down and we're going to see job losses and important community facilities being lost.
Aileen Campbell.
Again, we would point to the package of resources that we've put in place and measures that we've put in place, and hopefully when we emerge from this, that we recognise that those centres that Colin Smith talked about will once again become really, really crucial, important to make sure our communities can continue with their connectedness. So while there is not necessarily a direct pot of money that we've announced today that will directly respond to that particular need, we'll certainly take that point and come back to you, because it seems to me that there might need to be some way in which we can flexibly support what you say through some of the Third Sector Resilience Fund, making sure that we think about that community endeavour in its widest sense and actually recognise that for some communities it will be that business case that they'll need to have support through as well. So hopefully there is some way that we can support and help our communities who've already stepped up to the plate by taking on these assets and require now us to support them to continue to do so.